Hello, Jerry here with Season 3, Episode 25 of Ask Jerry Tachoir. If you'd like to ask me a question, simply go to my webpage, which is www.tachoir.com, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little tab for your information. Just click on that, fill out the form, and ask your question, and perhaps we'll do one of these videos. I usually forget to do that. Also, if you would, there's a little subscribe button, and I believe there's a little bell. If you click on those, I'll notify you when we have a new episode that comes out. Today's question comes from Lewis in Minnesota. Hello, Mr. Tachoir. It is such a pleasure watching your videos. Your playing is always so smooth and accurate and clean. I'm hoping someday to aspire to your level of performance. On that note, I'm struggling with what to practice. Could you talk about what you practice and how often? I'm a bit frustrated with rate of improvement on the instrument. Thanks, Lewis. Lewis, practice is one of those personal things that you have to decide that you want to do, and you have to find the time to do it. And not only that, but you have to know what to practice. And most of us tend to practice the stuff that we do really well. For some reason, it satisfies our ego that, hey, yeah, we can still play, and we do the stuff that we've done over and over and over and over again, and that we're just proficient at. So regarding my practice right now, I don't actually practice the way I used to. I mean, I perform so much now that I'm getting enough playing time in that it's satisfying my need to keep my chops accurate and clean and working really well. The only time I really practice right now is if I have a major event coming up, that there's something that maybe I know that I got to work on, something that's been giving me a little problems during my concerts or my performances, or if I have a recording coming up. A lot of times I'll practice a lot just to get my hands really smooth and accurate, so that when it comes time to hit the record button, everything's going to work. But when I first started out, I mean, I went to Berkeley, and I remember the first day walking in, and I was hearing these Japanese students, piano players. I'm walking down the hall, and I'm hearing these practice rooms, just this monster. I'm looking in the window, is this Chick Corea? Who is it? Herbie Hancock? And I'm hearing these monster players, and it scared me to the point where I said, wow, I've got to get my act together. So at that time, and fortunately my freshman year, I lived right across from the main Berkeley building, so I was able to, in between classes, run back to my apartment and practice and work on things and get it together. But at that time, I did a lot of practicing of scales and arpeggios. I did a lot of sight reading. I'd pull up any kind of material that I have, violin books, guitar books, and I'd put them on my stand, and I would try to read them down as accurately as possible. And I would always find a tempo that I could play it at without making mistakes. If I started making 2 mistakes, I would slow it down and play it nice, just so I can get through it. And then I would eventually make it faster and faster. But I practiced, honestly, like a maniac my first couple years at school, only because I realized there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of information that I'm getting in my classes at Berkeley that inspired me to challenge me to try to create things and to work on it. And analysis. I remember analyzing just everything. Part of the classes at Berkeley were you'd take a harmony class and where you look at a melody and you would analyze, is this the 9th, is this the 3rd, is this the 5th? And you go through the whole melody analyzing just that relationship to the chords. And then you go back and you analyze the chords. This is a 2, 5, 1, going to a 6 chord. You do the whole analysis of the chord scales. The chords. And then you put the scales to it, the modes. Is this Dorian, is this Mixolydian, is this Phrygian, put the scale to it, is this symmetrical, diminished? And I remember just analyzing. And then I'd come back to my instrument, and I would take a tune, and I would work on those scales that I analyzed and try to make them as smooth as possible where they would flow into each other and not sound like I'm playing chord, 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 but rather a line that kind of blends really nicely into the next chord and just has momentum and continuity and just kind of makes sense. So I practiced like a maniac. Again, now I'm at the point where I don't practice the way I used to, but I try to at least every day say hello to the instrument. If I don't have a concert or some kind of performance, I will at least come down and I'll say hello to the instrument. I'll play a little bit. I'll do a couple things and just play a couple tunes, make sure that my hands are still working really well, and just don't let it get away from you. I mean, there are times when, and I hate this, when you go on vacation or when you take a couple days off just to clear your head, you feel like your hands are not working the way they used to work. And I find that if I can just at least hold the mallets, just even if I'm on vacation, I take mallets with me, and I'll just sit there and I'll just do this. I'll hold the mallets just to make sure I remember what the weight of the mallets is like and keep my calluses going, and just to hold them, and it makes sense because I don't want to lose that sensitivity and the touch that you get from hanging onto the mallets. So that's real important, to try to always, even if you don't have a gig or something, make sure you say hello to your instrument every day you go down and play it. Now, regarding, I don't know what position you at, where you are harmonically or sight reading or what, but these are things that you need to work on. I mean, you need to make sure that if somebody gives you a piece of music, you can actually play it, you know, by sight reading it. And that's a hard thing to do. And then you also want to be able to, you know, you look at the chords. You want to be able to say, okay, I see what these chords are. I'm understanding how they resolve into each other. I can spontaneously analyze that, and I can also put a scale to it. And again, this comes from spending the time in analysis, looking at the tune, looking at the melody, and just kind of going through it. And it's slow. Take the pencil and do the, you know, the lines and the 2/5 ones, and assign the chord scales to it. And again, this is not an easy task. It takes a while. It takes a lot of study to get to that point. But one day, you'll all be, you know, you'll get to a tune that you've never seen before, and you'll put it on your stand, and all of a sudden, wow, it just kind of makes sense. I see it. I understand it. I don't have to get the paper and the pencil out and do the whole mumbo jumbo of analysis, but I can spontaneously do it and play it. And that's kind of where you want to get. Now, scales are one of those things that we all practice scales. We practice our C scale, our D flat scale, our D scale. We do that then, you know, over and over and over and over again. Well, at one point, you're going to know your scales. So let's quit playing scales as scales. Now let's start taking scales, and this is something that I picked up along the way of trying to take a scale which is, you know, normally laid out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Scale, and try to make melodic ideas with it. So I would take like a C scale. You know, and I would just take that and play around with it, noodle around with it. Now I know you're going to say, wait a minute, you said C scale, but I saw you play a couple of these notes up here. Well, I'm trying to create melodic devices. In other words, you've heard of, in analysis and composition class, things like scape tones, appoggiaturas, lower neighbor notes, chromatic approaches. These are things that I'm trying to do. Like, I want to get to the B. Well, how do you get to the B? Well, you can just hit the B, or chromaticize into it, half step into it, half step over, whole step, skip over it, come back to it. All those melodic devices are nice ways to get to your target note. So you got to keep that in mind, and you're just creating melodic ideas. But basically, I'm saying, for that example, I'm staying like pretty much in the key of C with the kind of extra notes I'm using as an effect to get to my target note, which again is in the key of C. So you can do things like that, which gets you away from the mundane playing scales as a scale, because you're never going to hear music as a scale. You're not going to go to a concert and somebody's going to come out and say, ladies and gentlemen, for my next performance, I'm going to do an E-flat scale. Doesn't make sense. Nobody wants to hear that. But you're going to take that E-flat scale and you're going to make melody out of it. You're going to make music by utilizing the notes of the E-flat scale. And once you get to the point where you know your scales, you know all your modes, I mean, you don't have to like think about it. You're really good at it. Then skip over practicing them as scales and do what I just kind of showed you to do, to try to create spontaneously improvised melodies utilizing what you have known of a scale and what the scale is offering you. So That's one suggestion. Voicings, you need to work on your chords. Don't always play chords in root position, right? Expand them. I had another video about this where you basically take the chord, exchange places with the outside two voices, and it creates a bigger chord, okay? So things like that, and you could go back and look at those videos. But that gives you bigger chords, which gives you a bigger sound. And the bigger you can get your chords, the easier it is then to have smooth voice leading, where you're going from chord to chord to chord easily, because you have more room to find common tones and to move the inside voices, and it just makes a lot of sense. So these are things that I used to practice like crazy until I got to the point where I was really comfortable with it. Again, now at my point, I play a lot. I don't really practice as much. Sometimes I feel like I do need to practice, and when I do, I'll come down and I'll just do the same thing all over again and practice at it. And again, I hope that gives you some information. I mean, you were asking the question pertaining to me, what I practice now. And so I covered a whole spectrum of when I first started out to where I'm at now. And practice is one of those things. You're not going to get there unless you really put the time in. So go ahead, and I wish you the best of luck, and practice like there's no tomorrow. Thank you so much. We'll see you at the next video.